And then the trip home that evening from the hospital, how did that go?
Yeah, I can't really remember. Like, my aunt, my dad's sister, was the mother of my cousin. She was traveling on her way. She had like a 3-4 hour drive, so she was still driving when he died. So she arrived. So it was me, my mum, my aunt, and my cousin. We were the only people then at the hospital after he died. And we were lucky. The ICU was really quiet that day, so they didn't need the bed. So we like stayed with him. So like it was probably a good 3 hours we were there for after he died, or maybe two or three. And then yeah, we left, and that was just, I remember like walking across the car park, like being held up by my cousin and just like shaking. Um, and then yeah, getting home, like we got back to my mum and dad's house. My aunt and cousin went back to my cousins who lives nearby, and we were just like, what's just happened? Like, what? And I remember like my mum, I really clearly remember. So my mum has lupus, just a autoimmune disease, and she has to, and she's got a blood condition, so she has to take medication at certain times, that has to be had with food. And obviously we hadn't eaten like all day at the hospital because not really that hungry when something like that's happening. But she had to have these pills. So I just remember her like, so we're like 10-11 o'clock at night back home, both of us like completely devastated and in shock, and bless her, she's trying to like force herself to eat a yogurt so she can take this medication. And yeah, it's just stuff like that kind of sticks. And then yeah, it's just like, what how just happened? Like, yeah, it's really, really weird. Really weird feeling.
And the next morning, when the administration almost and all the various processes that come after it, how did you deal with that?
Yeah, it's a lot. Like, I think it's a lot whenever anyone dies, but especially when someone dies very suddenly and at an age where you're not expecting them to die. No affairs have been wrapped up in any way. Yeah, so I think the first thing I sort of did was we had to tell everyone. And because he wasn't ill, no one was expecting to hear that news. So I had to make a lot of phone calls. We'd called a few people on the night it happened in a hospital, like my grandma and my parents' best friends. But the vast majority of people had to do the next morning, and that was horrific. I had people like screaming down the phone at me, like not like at me, but yeah.
How do you even begin to approach that conversation, knowing that you have to deliver that news?
I asked. I think people thought it was weird, like my parents' friends. Like, obviously, I wouldn't usually call them. So when I was ringing and was like, "Oh, it's Olivia," they were a bit like, "Oh." So I feel like some people kind of knew that something happened. And then I had to ask each of them if I had to check they weren't driving, because I thought, like, people can be on Bluetooth and speaker, and I thought, God, the last thing you want is to give someone a shock like that while they're driving and cause a crash. So that was what I always asked first. Yeah, and I don't really remember. I mean, it was weird saying it. Like, I found it really hard for ages to say that, like, my dad died. Yeah, I think I just kind of blurted it out each time. Like, yeah, it was weird, yeah. And people were obviously just like completely in shock. Yeah, it was just a bit of a blur that whole day. And then yeah, so much admin, like weeks and weeks and weeks worth of work. Just yeah, sorting everything out with the house and bills and death certificates and registrations and funeral and like my dad's work. And like, we're lucky that he was in the Met Police, so it was a death in service, so the Met really look after the family left behind.
How does that manifest itself to someone who doesn't know anything about the Met Police?
Yeah.
What would that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd say it's kind of a few sides to it. I mean, there is like financially, we like wouldn't be okay with, like, without them. Like, it very, very like helped us with sort of various schemes that my dad had paid into throughout his time. Obviously, you hope that you never get the sort of benefit from them, but it's good that they're there.
For sure.
They, we decided we did want a service funeral, so they're very involved in that, helping with organising and with sort of ceremonial parts. It's like a drape that goes on the coffin, and they do a guard of honour, and it's like various bits throughout the service, which was really nice. Loads of his colleagues came in their sort of ceremonial uniform. And
what does a ceremonial police officer's uniform look like?
It's just a bit fancy. It's what they wear like when they have their like pass. They barely ever wear it. They wear it for like their passing out parade, when they first joined the police. And I honestly don't know any other time that my dad would have worn his. There must have been something, but it's basically like a very like smart. I think they're called tunics, but it looks like a suit, like a smart jacket thing, and they have the hat and all the stripes and things.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then they've also, his sort of immediate team, his sergeant, is like still regularly in touch with my mum. He's, they've helped with like just random things around the house. And they did, when it was about 6 months in, they got like a plaque put up to him in like the borough headquarters. Nice. So we went up there and they did like a little afternoon tea. Only recently, actually, we got from them a book, like a memorial book that had like gathered everyone's like messages and things police-wise into one place. They made this sort of, it's in a giant frame. It's got like his numbers and like bits from from like stripes, like in a nice frame. So yeah, just stuff like that.
And what did you? I would imagine a number of your colleagues, or a number of your dad's colleagues, you didn't necessarily know much before his death. How did meeting them, change, or what did you find out about your dad from meeting his colleagues?
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like, particularly with the police, people often do keep it quite separate with their like home life, just because of the nature of the job, I guess. But I knew that he had like good friends there. We used to tease him. There was one lady in particular who was like his best friend, and they got on like a house on fire. But they were so different. She was like very glam and like just lovely lady. Like we know her really well now. And they just always be texting like kids and like giggling and just getting into trouble and stuff like that. But yeah, we'd never like really met. I certainly hadn't met any of them. I don't think my mum had either. So it was really nice to kind of finally put faces to names of all these people and kind of learn about him through their eyes. And it was quite funny because he definitely wasn't a person having like a double life, like a secret life. Like the things they were saying and like would tease him about, me and my mum were like, yeah, that's literally like.
Oh, what sort of things? Do you have a specific example?
He'd have to like have a banana at like 11 o'clock exactly, and he'd have to have his tea like brewed exactly right at the right time, and he'd be obsessive about catching the right train and like just little things. That just, he's just clearly exactly the same like as he is at home. But I think what struck me was like how many people were really like genuinely affected and genuinely like devastated by his death and sort of the suddenness of it. Like obviously me and my mum were always going to be like, it's always going to change our world, like we're going to be distraught, but to kind of have so many people, like I was social media manager for my mum in the days after, and like I received hundreds of messages from people he'd worked with ages ago, and just obviously all that generation is still on Facebook, so that's kind of was quite a good way to get the word out. And yes, so many messages, and even now like people still still talk about him and they still really miss him, which is really nice. I think because being an only child, it's he was only my dad, so I feel like I don't have a big family that kind of feel that level of loss that me and obviously my mum has. But so this is kind of a nice like other way of kind of getting that, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, and we've spent a lot more time with his colleagues. We've been to visit like his best friend down in Whitstable, which was lovely. So it's really nice.
Nice.